to the ENVIROlocity Career Interview Series. This accompanies the ENVIROlocity blog that you can find on the website, and this is where we are sharing information about environmental careers, all types of environmental careers from actual working environmental professionals. I want you to hear about people's insights, how do they get their jobs, what do they recommend for you if you're looking for a job in that field, and just sort of give you a repository of interviews to look through to kind of navigate your career and figure out what it is you would like to do with your experience and interest. So this week we are talking to Andy Cummings, and welcome Andy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Lauren. Pretty excited.
I'm super excited to hear what you have to say about this specific topic. I hear from lots of people who are interested in corporate sustainability and how you break that barrier between environmental field experience that they have and into corporate world. So I would like to just jump right in and hear from you about what your title is, what it is that you do.
Absolutely. So I am a manager for CDP, their supply chain program. For those who are not familiar with CDP, formerly known as the Carbon Disclosure Project, we are a global nonprofit organization that runs a disclosure platform through which cities, states, regions, investors, corporates are able to disclose their environmental information. We aggregate that data and then we return it to key stakeholders who are very interested in receiving that information. Those two key stakeholders are the investor community and supply chain members, large purchasing organizations, and that's who I support. So I manage the integration and delivery of that program for 16 of our North American members who have a combined annual spend of about $300 billion in procurement spend.
Awesome. That sounds like very important work. And I also heard a lot of information in there about financials and businessy world stuff. So things that might terrify someone whose background is in environment. So can you talk a little bit about what experiences or, key words that end up on your job description?
Yeah, I do not come from a finance background. So this was relatively new to me when I first got started in this space about 3 years ago. My background is much more on the ground doing environmental advocacy, education, agriculture, small business development. And so when I transitioned from that space into supply chains, I definitely had a bit of a learning curve, but a lot of the concepts were familiar to me. They just had a different vocabulary. So I just had to kind of figure out the vocabulary to use with the audience that I was trying to engage with, really.
Awesome. And can you talk a little bit about that early experience that you had that helped you to translate or help you get your foot in the door at the job?
My career path has been kind of circuitous. I was an environmental educator on a boat working for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. I did US Peace Corps in Burkina Faso, West Africa, environmental agribusiness there. And so I think these little nuggets throughout my career path allowed me to gain a pretty diverse vantage point, which certainly translates to my current role, where those 16 companies that I work directly with are in a lot of different sectors. And certainly their suppliers come from a lot of different spaces as well. So I'm able to kind of relate more tangibly to folks in the food and beverage sector or IT sector based on my past experiences.
Awesome. And then prior to that, keep working backwards here. Did you always have an interest in working in environmental?
I did. I studied political science in undergrad and was really interested in policy, but always was very interested in environment. However, never really kind of took that step forward until I started working for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, which was an environmental nonprofit in Maryland focused on advocacy and saving the bay. And so that really kind of put that policy framework much more in focus. But as I expanded my education in the policy world, I was kind of a little frustrated with how slow sometimes policy can move. And so that led me into a much more proactive space, which currently I am now in, where companies are able to recognize what they need to do to really reduce their own environmental impacts. And then I can help facilitate their goals through supplier engagement.
Okay, wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about I just graduated with my environmental studies, and I've realized that I want to work, fight climate change, and I'd like to do that through business. I really find the business world interesting, but I just really have no idea like how to even begin filling out my resume or eliminating a skills gap that I have. What can I do, and what direction can I head in to just try to, gain some traction there?
Absolutely. One thing that really helped me is after graduate school, I took 2 internships, one with 100 Resilient Cities, the other with CDP, and that allowed me to get some more tangible skills on the ground working in the environmental space while gaining new skills relating to a bit more finance related or business related, some areas that I wasn't as fluent in, and then I could translate those into other opportunities. But the sustainability field is quite large. When I look at sustainability, environmental is only one component of that. And the folks that are doing environmental, there's a lot of movement in that space. So people coming into it, people transitioning out of it. And so I don't think people who are getting in this space need to know everything, all of the answers, but you should be a go-getter, be willing to jump into something that is a little unfamiliar to you and able to work through that quickly by yourself, more or less. Not a lot of hand holding. So if you're looking to get into the space that is more about environmental disclosure, certainly be familiar with CDP questionnaire or GRI reporting or some of the other frameworks like TCFD, the Task Force on Environmental Financial Disclosure, and be able to articulate that in job interviews or in your current job. And then go from there, I think. Yeah.
Okay, great. So a lot of speaking the language and just kind of getting comfortable with it, maybe some research.
Speaking the language, getting comfortable with it, research, and it is kind of a challenge to get your foot in the door, but I think too, if you're able to network, either attend some events or use your peer groups to open the doors for you and so they could kind of listen for potential positions, and then you make those connections, and sometimes they just fall in place.
Perfect. I always love to hear networking as a key skill. So any advice you have there about where to network or anything that was particularly helpful for you?
Network wherever and whenever. I think be friendly to everybody that you come across, because you never know when that person might translate into either an opportunity or just a great relationship, and you're really glad to have a new friend. I think so often we try to network with a specific goal in mind versus just networking to understand what the person is doing in their own field. And then if you do it that way, those people might come back into your sphere later on, and you might also have a different interest that aligns with that earlier connection as well. So I think networking for a lot of folks, I think, is hard because people oftentimes aren't used to putting themselves out there and just introducing themselves and say, hi, I'm Andy Cummings, I'm interested in this, I would love to talk to you about that. But we're all here to learn, and I think a lot of people are willing to support, especially young professionals in this space, helping them kind of navigate, their own life or their own job search, and provide some information about their own experiences to help those young professionals.
Awesome. Good points. And I always say this, I feel like environmental professionals as a whole, of course, there's always exceptions, are usually pretty willing to help out and to try to mentor others. We're all working towards a common goal and want to help others succeed to also reach that higher goal.
I would agree. I think we're all idealistic. We all want to save the world in some capacity, but there's a lot of pragmatism behind that idealism. We want to make sure this is done and done properly, and put structures in place that, the environment and the world is better off 20, 30, 40 years from now. We don't have to keep pushing this stone uphill at some point.
Right. Absolutely. So speaking of that, I think another thing that might be a little bit scary for people in working in a corporate field in comparison to going out in the field and working with, wildlife or something, is working with other adults and people. So do you have any advice or suggestions for just professional development, like once you're on the job and working in that corporate realm versus field world?
Don't take things personally. and realize that there's a lot of competing personalities out there. And so understand your role within that organization, work as hard as you can to fulfill that role, have some bright ideas along the way, and have some vision about where you want to go. The people that I work with, who I think we collaborate the best in, we understand our shared objectives and we kind of work collaboratively to achieve those while still recognizing that we have individual objectives that might not be so collaborative. But it's not necessarily a competition because we're all trying to achieve kind of the common goal. There certainly are people in your career who will just be challenging to work with, but that's part of the nature of working with a diverse group of people. And I think if you're open and honest and reflective about your own ways of working, will help you be a better colleague and employee and potential employer as well.
Awesome. I think those are all very good suggestions. And speaking of keeping an eye on your own goals, so where are you? What's in store for Andy in the future?
Ooh, I don't know. As I mentioned earlier, I think, most environmentalists have this idealism that they want to save the world, and I'm one of them. I really enjoy working in the environmental space. I like also linking environmental improvement with social equity and social improvement, because climate change is going to hit communities of lower needs extremely hard, or lower resources, I should say, extremely hard. And so figuring out how we can not only limit climate change to a 1.5 degree scenario, if you will, but also making sure that as we transition away from a carbon intensive economy, that folks don't get left behind, that we're able to reach out to the communities that might need support, either through resiliency or mitigation plans as the oceans rise. The New York Times, I think, just came out with a crazy report that articulated how in 2050, the water projections, the sea level rise projections were significantly low, and they're actually going to be substantially higher. So just kind of trying to link environmental justice with where we are currently, things like that.
Fantastic. So you mentioned a couple of things in there that I think are important topics, and we've heard from before. Kevin Gallagher was on here, and he's working on this, the notion of when we work in environmental areas and in individuals and environmental professionals alike, how it could be potentially depressing as well when you think you're doing this great thing and a report comes out and says, maybe we're not actually that close to the goal we thought we were. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? How do you stay motivated? How do you, keep fighting this fight every day and stay in the game? So especially for emerging professionals who haven't even started and there's this, huge goal to tackle.
There definitely are pretty down moments. New reports come out, such as the one we just mentioned for the New York Times about the 2050 sea level rise mappings, or the IPCC report where it says we only have about a decade to really put in place the structures to reverse the worst impacts of climate change. But optimistically, I feel like the generation that is up and coming, it has a tremendous amount of motivation and potential to really implement this stuff. So I take a lot of pride in the fact that the younger kids are going to, hopefully, fingers crossed, be the change agents that we all need. There's also a massive job security component in this. If we're all working towards a better future, better environmental policies, programs, sustainability, things like that, that job position is not going to go away anytime soon. And I think just don't get lost in the larger picture of things. Climate change, if we're talking about climate change, is massive. It's global. We all have an individual part to play. So climate change is a big, unwieldy beast. It's a global problem. And so currently, I'm focused on 16 companies and their suppliers and their critical suppliers in the value chain to try and improve their environmental performance. So I'm focused on kind of my lane, what's directly in front of me, while also recognizing the pending potential doom for global climate change.
can you tell us a little bit about those 16 companies that you're responsible for? Like, what's your favorite thing? What do you love about doing that?
I really enjoy how the companies that I work for, or work with, I should say, are really setting the tone for environmental commitments at a corporate scale. So right now, science-based targets are one of the key things that companies can do to reduce their own emissions impacts. And there's a lot of nuance with science-based targets, but for those companies who are able to commit and set a target, then they're able to identify their own component to reduce emissions to hopefully prevent, again, the worst impacts of climate change. So working with companies that have that ambition is really amazing. And then being able to help them navigate what that means as it translates to their suppliers. On the flip side, working with companies who aren't at that stage yet, but helping them understand that they can be, and providing them the tools and the resources.
That it sounds like a wonderful, awesome job. And I'm with you. I believe that, if we are going to be saved as a species on this planet and our environment, that businesses have to get on board and lead the way.
And businesses are, yeah, I think certainly there's different political climates, there's different regulatory climates around the globe, but companies have a tremendous role to play. So if you look at the Paris Accord, there is a significant gap between what those national commitments say and what we need to do. And so companies are the mechanism that we really need to work with. So as an environmentalist, sometimes I struggle with working with some of these companies, but they have a tremendous seat at the table. They have tremendous potential, and they're looking for really amazing ideas and how to achieve this. So I would also say, don't shy away from the corporate space just because you are also an environmentalist. These folks have a significant role to play in making sure that we improve our environment.
Yep, I totally agree. So we're running out of time. In hindsight, as far as your career goes, or navigating your career, is there anything you would have done differently?
Maybe when I'm 80, I'll be able to answer that better. At this point, I've done a bunch of different things that have given me a bunch of little nuances and skill sets that come into play in random points of my life. For instance, as a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa, riding a bush taxi in Burkina Faso is very cramped. And when I'm on the New York subway, on a very packed car, I kind of return to my Peace Corps state, and it helps me navigate. So I don't have any major regrets. Just learn as much, get as much different experience, and be sure to laugh at yourself, because things are kind of funny sometimes.
That's awesome. Thank you. And so we're going to wrap up with my lightning round questions. I just say two things and you pick one. It's a little insight into Andy.
Ooh.
So iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Netflix or movies out?
Movies, Netflix.
Bike or walk?
Bike.
Blue or red?
Blue.
And recycle or repurpose?
Repurpose.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and your insights and advice and enthusiasm for your work. And is it okay if I put your contact information into the description so people may contact you if they have questions about what you do or how they can get involved?
Feel free to drop my LinkedIn in the description. Awesome.
Thank you. So for those tuned in, thank you for being here. If you missed it, well, you're tuned in on YouTube or Facebook, be sure to hit the subscribe button so that you will get notified when we have future interviews. And if you have any suggestions or requests for a specific type of work or industry, let me know. And otherwise, we will catch you next time. Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you, Laura. It was a pleasure.